Welcome to K-Drama for Sleep, where your favourite K-dramas turn into soft, soothing stories to drift off to. Imagine living your life unable to touch another person, where even the smallest contact could put you in danger. A lonely man who believes he's allergic to human touch, a woman pretending to be a robot, and a lie that begins as a simple test, slowly turn into something far more complicated as real emotions begin to grow in a world built on deception. But the closer they become, the harder it is to keep pretending, and the truth threatens to break everything they've started to feel. And the most fragile part? Discovering that love, even when it's real, can still begin with a lie. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe so you can fall asleep to more of your favourite K-drama stories. So get comfortable, relax your mind, and let the story gently carry you into sleep. The story begins with a sports car, a syringe, and a man who has spent 15 years convinced that being alone is the only safe thing left to be, though, as you'll soon see, he isn't nearly as good at it as he thinks. The first thing we see is a man preparing for war. Kim Min-kyu sits in his car, opening a special briefcase the way a soldier opens his kit. Gloves, a mask, a syringe, a black baton that extends with a click. He has been summoned to a hearing where military doctors must decide whether his exemption from compulsory service is real, or whether he is, as they suspect, simply rich enough to dodge the draft. They scoff at his file and prepare to mark him fit. So Min-kyu stands, removes a glove, and grasps the wrist of the doctor closest to him. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then red blotches bloom across his skin like fire spreading through paper, climbing his arm, his throat. He pulls out his syringe and plunges it into his own thigh without flinching. The doctors back away in horror. They sign his papers. They very much want this man to leave. He drives home through tall iron gates. Inside the great house, balloons drift from the ceiling. There is a small cake with a candle. The guest of honour is a robot vacuum cleaner, wearing a tiny birthday hat. Min-kyu kneels in front of it, calls it our cutie, and presents a pack of fresh batteries so that the two of them can stay together a long time. It would be easy, watching this, to laugh. It would also be easy to cry. Both reactions are, in their own way, the right one. He drifts through his enormous house. Glass cases hold rare collectibles. In one corner stands a great house of cards, taller than he is, the kind of project only a man with nothing but time would build. He narrates softly, almost defensively, that he lives quite well on his own. Then he chokes on a handful of pills and has to slam himself against a pillar to perform the Heimlich on his own ribs. He floats in his pool afterward and announces to the air that he is not lonely. He simply needs his space. Across the city, our second main character is also working hard. Jojia is camped on the sidewalk outside a shop, third in line, waiting for a limited edition figure to drop. She is a proxy buyer, a hustler with a quick smile, queuing through cold nights so paying customers can have rare things without freezing for them. When the doors open, she snatches the prize figure off the display and shields it with her body. As she protects the box, a child holding a corn dog bumps her elbow, and a thin red line of ketchup smears across the cardboard. She doesn't see it. The smear is there. The smear will change her life. She delivers the box to a black car waiting by the river. The buyer, in the back seat with his window cracked an inch, is Min-kyu. Of course he is. His eyes find the smear. To him, the smear is more than a smear. It is evidence of negligence, and negligence is a kind of betrayal. He refuses to pay her a single one. He locks his doors and pulls slowly away. She runs after the car, pounding on the trunk. She trips. She falls hard. The car stops. Even at his worst, Min-kyu cannot drive away from someone who is hurt. He pulls on a glove and approaches her warily. The second he gets close enough, her eyes fly open. She grabs his collar. He pries her off and bolts back to his car, but the contact is just long enough. The rash climbs his neck, and he has to inject himself in the thigh while steering with one hand. That evening, a drone whirs into his estate and crash lands in his aquarium. Tied to it is a USB drive from a research team called Santa Maria. The video on it shows a young woman on a squash court, calm, precise, and a tall, anxious engineer named Hong Baek-gyun, who introduces her as RG-3, the world's most advanced humanoid robot. Min-kyu, who technically owns her parent company, is invited to come see her in person. He drives to a shabby lab. A small, glowing, emoji-faced robot leads him down a hallway to a darkened room where a young woman sits in a circle of light. She rises and walks toward him as easily as breathing. "Are you Chairman Kim Min-kyu?" she asks. She has the same features as the proxy buyer he just made an enemy of by the river, only with longer hair and a different stillness. She extends her hand. Min-kyu rears back and brandishes his baton. He cannot be fooled. He insists he is being pranked. So RG-3 reaches behind her, unzips her dress, and slides aside 2 panels in her chest. Inside her body, gears turn. Min-kyu's eyes widen in pure, helpless wonder. Because for the first time in 15 years, he has met something that looks human enough to want to touch, and that he is allowed to touch. The trouble, of course, is that the miracle is not quite real. But that's a problem for tomorrow. The miracle has a battery, and the battery has a problem. Min-kyu, slowly, taps RG-3's side with his baton. She does not flinch. Whatever she is, she's not flesh. He removes one glove and extends a single finger toward her. She touches her fingertip to his, gently, a robot's borrowed greeting from an old film. He breaks contact almost immediately and checks his wrist monitor. It glows a peaceful, steady blue. For the first time in 15 years, Kim Min-kyu has touched something alive-looking and not been punished for it. Baek-gyun walks him through her specifications. 3 hours of charge. Reads emotions. Needs about a month of focused training to bond fully with a single user. The lights flicker as he speaks. Min-kyu wants RG-3 delivered to his house the next morning. What Baek-gyun knows, and what Min-kyu doesn't, is that there is no time at all. That night, the team gathers around takeout containers. P, the meticulous engineer, is working on RG-3 when Hoktal, the senior technician with the questionable jokes, lobs an empty can across the lab in some kind of celebratory toss and lands a single drop of beer right inside RG-3's open chest. Sparks fly. She goes dark. The part they need is 2 days away. 2 days they don't have. If Min-kyu pulls funding, the team's lifework evaporates. So Baek-gyun does some panicked research, opens a drawer, and pulls out an old photograph. The photograph is of a young woman with short hair and a quick smile. She looks identical to RG-3, because RG-3 was modelled on her. Her name is Jo Jia. She is the most reluctant ex-girlfriend in Korea. Jia, at this exact moment, is sitting outside a convenience store with a cluster of beer cans, vowing she'll take out a loan and pay back her brother. Her phone rings. She tells the caller, on principle, that she does not need a loan, and hangs up. It rings again. This time she changes her tune and tells the caller, by accident, to send her 10 million won. The caller agrees. She realises the voice on the other end is Hong Baek-yoon, her ex, the one nobody in her family will discuss politely. She freezes. She looks out the window of the convenience store. He is standing right there. He has tracked her down. She tries to slip away. She runs straight into him. He looks at her, the new short hair, the slightly fuller figure, and stammers, in horror, that she has changed too much. He is already calculating, right? A wig will cover the hair, a bodysuit will solve the figure. Gia, watching him do this calculation out loud, observes dryly that this is the most Baek-gyun thing imaginable. Most people, she points out, would ask how she's been. After much bickering and a great deal of wounded pride, Gia agrees to hear him out. He explains that the job is something only she can do. She suspects, briefly, that he wants to harvest her organs. He clarifies that, in a way, he wants to harvest her face. He brings her to the lab. The team gapes. The damaged Agi 3 sits in her chair, blank, with Gia's exact face turned politely toward the room. Gia goes home and tells her best friend Sun Hai, an unflappable coffee shop owner, who urges her to take the job. A short while later, Gia is sitting on the steps outside her house, listening to her brother and sister-in-law argue about her through the wall. Her brother is firm. She cannot come home until she pays back her debt. Gia, very quietly, decides she has no other option. She returns to the lab. Both she and Baek-gyun, very carefully, do not look at each other while announcing they have no lingering feelings. The team dresses her in titanium-reinforced body armour that flattens her chest. Pai places a wig on her head. Contact lenses are fitted into her eyes, lenses that double as tiny screens, capable of feeding her real-time text and video. A wrist transmitter connects her to the team. Once everything is activated, she's linked directly to the damaged but still conscious Agi 3, who can see what she sees and feed her instructions in real time. The next morning, Hoktal and Sanit pack her into a wooden crate inside the team's van and drive her to Min-kyu's mansion. Inside the crate, her phone rings. It's Min-kyu, calling her in her own life as President Joe, accusing her of stealing his necklace. Apparently, when she clung to his collar at the river, his mother's necklace came loose. Gia, who's at this moment hidden inside a wooden crate inside this man's foyer, tells him he needs a psychiatrist and hangs up. The crate opens. Min-kyu approaches, expectant. He lifts the lid. Inside, Agi 3 lies still. "Hi, Agi 3, he says. She opens her eyes, begins her scripted line, and then, mid-syllable, gets a good look at his face and launches herself out of the crate with a yell. In the lab, the team turns to stone. In the foyer, Min-kyu blinks, utterly bewildered, and slowly raises his phone. Pai, the fastest thinker in the room, hisses into Baek-gyun's ear what to say. Baek-gyun stutters that this is just a small operational glitch, a friend mode that activates randomly and resets within seconds. Min-kyu, against all odds, accepts the explanation. Gia, bracing herself, forces her voice into robotic calm. She closes her eyes. She opens them. "I love you, Master," she says, with the dead-eyed sweetness of an instruction manual. "What can I help you with?" He nods, satisfied. The deception holds. For now. The first day of the test does not go smoothly, because the universe has a sense of humour. The warehouse's electricity cuts out, and Jia's lens display vanishes mid-sentence. Suddenly, in the middle of a strange man's mansion, in a wig and a bodysuit, she's alone with no script. Min-Kyu, oblivious, has decided the morning will be a hardware test. He issues complex commands. Stand on one foot. Hold this position. Solve this. Jia totters and prays nothing will fall off. To her surprise, Min-Kyu doesn't catch her. He just clicks his tongue, deducts points, and moves on. His next test is a mathematical puzzle inside a locked box. She has 3 minutes to crack the code. She has none of the math. After a frozen second of panic, she does the most Jia thing imaginable. She smashes the box open with her bare hands. Inside is a single egg. She presents it to him with great dignity. Min-Kyu pauses. Direct problem solving. He marks her up. She cracks the egg on her own forehead, because of course she does, and peels it cleanly for him. When he tests her search capabilities by asking the serial number of an action figure in his glass case, Jia almost laughs. She bought that figure for him. She rattles off every digit with the confidence of a quiz champion, while silently cursing him for never paying her. Then his eyes narrow on her chest, which he's now sure has gotten bigger since yesterday. He raises a hand toward her sternum to check the battery. At that moment, the audio link comes back online, and the team is greeted in their headphones by Jia, unleashing a frankly impressive volley of curses at Min-Kyu's general direction. Baekhyun drops to his knees in horror. But on Min-Kyu's end, the complaint isn't about the cursing. It's about the chest. He suspects cheap batteries. He worries the robot will explode. Pai, recovering with the speed of a true professional, supplies a story about an upgraded battery pack. Min-Kyu, mollified, hangs up. The day continues. He swallows a handful of his pills in the wake of the morning's excitement and chokes. He really chokes, fingers at his throat, eyes wide. Jia drops the script. She's at his side, slamming the heel of her hand against his back, frantic. The pills come up. He gasps. He kneels, panting. She doesn't stop. She rubs his back the way you rub the back of someone who has scared you half to death. The way a friend rubs a friend. Min-Kyu, still kneeling, looks up at her in pure, dazed astonishment. For Agi 3, in the lab, his expression is impossible to understand. There is no clean label for it. For Jia, his expression has the strange shape of someone seeing kindness for the first time in years. She covers fast. She tells him this is a learned emergency response. He nods slowly and extends one finger toward her. She, smiling, claps both her warm hands around his. That night, Min-Kyu lies on his couch and looks at his unmarked palm. He flexes his fingers. He has been touched today. Twice. By a girl. By something with a face. And he is still alive. He laughs softly to himself, as if at a joke nobody else has heard. And in his head, an idea begins to form. Maybe he can train this robot. Not just to clean. Not just to fetch. Maybe he can train her to be a friend. He grins to himself in the dark. "Shall I?" he says to the ceiling. "Give it a shot." If the friendship is going to grow, it needs a place to grow in. Min-Kyu, impressed enough by Agi 3 to want her near him every day, has decided to host the entire Santa Maria team on his estate for a month-long deep learning trial. Baekhyun negotiates 1 week of grace, but it is plain that he has lost the larger argument. They are going to be living, all of them, on the property of the man they are deceiving. That same morning, an anonymous informant called Madam X sends Min-Kyu files on De Yang's late chairman. He realises Daeang's late chairman had been secretly funding Baekgyun's robot work. He summons Jin Bae, his right-hand man inside KM Financial, and instructs him to find out who else inside the company knows about Santa Maria. Especially Yu Chul, the CEO. Especially Chairman Huang, his father. That same day, Jia and Sun Hai are testing the working pair of heart lamps in a little workshop. When one is touched, the other lights up across the room, no matter how far apart they are. Jia has been working on this idea for years. It is the centerpiece of her finalist application in KM Financial's National Entrepreneurship Competition. If she wins, she gets 100 million won and a future. Then comes the news that knocks the laughter out of her. The competition has been postponed indefinitely. The decision has come from the chairman of the board himself. Jia, angry and desperate, decides to write a heartfelt letter. Sun Hai helps her track down the chairman's home address. They go to deliver it in person. They arrive at a vast iron gate. As they stand there, the gate swings open for an arriving car. Through the windshield, Jia glimpses a familiar face. Min Kyu, lost in thought, driving past her without seeing her. The gate closes. She has just discovered, in the worst possible way, who exactly the chairman of the board is. That night her brother loses what little patience he had left. Jinbei has noticed she suddenly has cash, and he is sure she has taken out a loan from gangsters. He searches her room. His eyes catch on her heart. Lamps. He smashes one of them in a spasm of frustration and tells her to leave. She kneels in the wreckage. She tells him she's never done anything dishonest. He counters that she has never done anything worthwhile either. The words land with the precision of a slap. She gathers what she can. She agrees. She can't live with him anymore. In the morning, Sanip texts her, pleading. The team needs her to be the robot for just a few more days. She agrees, on the simple condition of being fed and housed. Soon, they're on the move. Outside the warehouse, the team's shabby van rolls out, and just behind them, another van rolls in. Two men in dark suits get out, looking for Santa Maria. They're late by minutes. Inside KM Financial's corporate towers, Chairman Huang takes the call. He is, at the same moment, holding a private meeting with a very tall, very wealthy foreign buyer, a man known only as Martin, who already knows that Santa Maria was a robotics team and is furious that the sale has been cancelled. Chairman Huang assures him, smoothly, that no one else inside KM knows the truth, not even his own son Yu Chul. Meanwhile, the Santa Maria team rolls onto Minkyu's grounds for the first time. They gape at the mansion. Minkyu watches them through binoculars from his upper window, faintly smiling. "Welcome to my home," he says, almost shy. Their living quarters turn out to be a small drafty outbuilding. Worse, the team has snuck Jia inside a duffel bag. Butler Sung, the steward of the estate, very nearly notices the shifting fabric. They distract him just in time. A short while later, Minkyu calls Baekgyun out for a private conversation. He wants to know how to train Aji 3. Baekgyun explains that if Aji 3 focuses her learning on one person, she becomes extraordinarily accurate at reading him. She becomes, in essence, his. Minkyu and Aji 3, really Minkyu and Jia, meet again in his living room. He steps closer. He points to her chest. "I'll make my own room inside you," he tells her. He says it as if making space for someone in a house with too many empty rooms. "Don't let anyone else in," he says. "Only I can enter." He closes the last of the distance between them and tells her, with a strange, shy gravity, that from now on he is going to train her. From now on, she should look only at him, look after him, follow only him. She is not a robot. He does not know. The training begins, and the comedy begins with it. But underneath the comedy, something else is moving. Min-kyu introduces Jia to the household hierarchy. He calls forward, with great solemnity, the items he's officially designated as pretty: a back scratcher, the vintage robot vacuum, the new robot vacuum, whose birthday party we've already attended. Jia learns she is ranked beneath all three. The vacuums are her seniors. She, internally, mutters that he is profoundly unwell. Watching the live feed from the barn, Baek-yun bursts out laughing, and then, mid-laugh, his stomach lets out a grim noise. The team has eaten the same curry, and the curry has decided to express opinions. The trouble is, Jia has eaten that curry too. As Min-kyu ushers her through forbidden zones, her composure begins to crack. Then comes one of the most unfortunate set pieces in the show. Min-kyu, gazing at an old photograph of himself and a young girl, tells Aji-3 to create a folder for the memory and asks her to name it. He's lost in a softer expression. The girl, we will learn, is his first love. And in that exact moment of tenderness, Jia, who has been holding it in for too long, releases an extraordinarily loud and audible fart. The folder gets named Damn It, because AG3 takes the next word she hears. Jia, making a heroic recovery, blames it on him and helpfully suggests he might want to change his underwear. Min-kyu bolts off in shame. Jia bolts off in the other direction, toward a bathroom of her own, while Baek-yun, in the lab, screams into the speaker that she must hold it in if it kills her. She does not. A perfume bottle takes the place of soap. Min-kyu bursts in, accuses her of lying, slips on the abandoned soap, and goes airborne. Jia, in a split-second decision, lunges for the perfume rather than for him. He hits the tile. She lands on top of him and her titanium corset. Once the chaos calms, Min-kyu finds himself in a massage chair, pride wounded. He shows her a video of a heroic dog rescuing a man wearing a dog mask, and explains that she should be loyal like that dog. Then he does something strange. He runs off, returns wearing a cat mask, lies on the floor, and meows pitifully. He calls for AG3 to recognise him. This is, on its surface, ridiculous. It is also, beneath the surface, one of the quietly important moments in the entire story. Because what he is testing is the question that has been tormenting him since the day his parents died. The question of whether anyone looking at him will see him, past the welts, past the wealth, past the fortress, and recognise him as still being himself. After a beat, Jia plays along. "Oh, it's my master," she says. He lifts the mask. "Oh, it's a cat," she says. He laughs, despite himself. Then he says, very softly, that he hopes she will recognise him no matter what he looks like. He reaches out, very gently, and pats her head. He tells her if she can do that, he will adore her. He doesn't realise he's making a promise to a person. Later, with the same gentleness, he gives her an emergency manual. If he ever changes so much that she cannot recognise him, if his face is unrecognisable, if his body is in trouble, she should go into his off-limits room, take a syringe from the locked drawer, and inject him. Jia files it carefully away. The day rolls on. Jia, seizing a chance, urges him to revive the entrepreneurship competition. She tells him he's unbelievably cool for having organised it in the first place, words he himself instructed her to input about him. He waves the contest off as a trivial event for con artists. Gia, who has bet her life on that trivial event, fumes silently. He covers it by ordering her to vacuum. She vacuums, angrily, beside the great house of cards. The vacuum bumps the table. The cards begin to fall, card by card in slow motion. The entire tower collapses in a long, soft cascade. Min-kyu screams in genuine grief. Gia stands frozen in the wreckage. Baek-yun, recovering, hisses at her to fake a low battery shutdown. She closes her eyes and slumps. Min-kyu is left to fume alone in a snowdrift of cards. When she wakes, later, she finds him in his chair with a hollowed-out face. He tells her he doesn't feel a real connection with her. He sounds tired. He sounds disappointed in a way he cannot fully name. That night, Min-kyu, alone in his living room, looks up the dictionary definition of relationship. Planting roots in another person's heart, it says. He frowns. He is not at all sure how that is meant to work with a robot. But the seed, at this point, is already in the soil. He just doesn't know yet whose soil it is. He wakes up the next morning differently. Sun is streaming through the window where the great house of cards used to stand. The room is brighter than it has been in years. He summons AG3 and tells her, half to himself, that he is grateful. He is grateful she has brought the sun back into his house. Gia, inside the suit, allows herself the tiniest of smiles. The smile vanishes when a car pulls up to the gate, and Min-kyu's face hardens. Yu-chul has come to ask why the Daeang sale was cancelled. Min-kyu hides Gia. He receives Yu-chul on the lawn, with the kind of polite distance reserved for men who used to be brothers and no longer can be. They speak as if they are still children pretending to be men. Min-kyu observes, without raising his voice, that the more Yu-chul speaks, the less he deserves to be CEO. Yu-chul's smile flickers. When Yu-chul leaves, Min-kyu shows Gia photographs of him and Chairman Huang. He calls them his archenemies. He warns her, earnestly, to hide herself if she ever crosses paths with them. They, he says, are dangerous people, and if they ever discover what she is, they will not hesitate to take her apart. He says all of this thinking he is protecting a robot. He is, in fact, drawing the rules that will eventually save a woman's life. Soon after, Jinbei arrives for a briefing. Min-kyu calls for AG3 to bring coffee. Gia, balancing a tray, walks into the room and finds herself face to face with her own brother. Her heart stops. She angles her head, hides her face behind a curtain of the hair, sets the tray down. Jinbei looks up curiously. He does not quite recognize her, but something tugs at him. The exchange continues. Jinbei has been investigating AG3. He has been told the model who inspired her was a real woman. He has not yet been told the woman's name. He looks at her face, and a small, half-formed unease gathers in his chest. When he is gone, Min-kyu turns to AG3 and asks her how to categorize Jinbei, friend or foe. Gia answers that her brother is obviously honest and hardworking. Min-kyu nods, but points out calmly that none of those descriptions tell him how Jinbei will behave around him, and that's the thing that matters most. Trustworthy is a thing other people decide. Trustworthy toward me is the only meaningful kind. Later that day, he takes her out in the car. They pass close to KM Financial, where a small protest is gathered. Citizens upset that the celebrated entrepreneurship competition has been suspended. Gia tells him, without thinking, that in a democracy, people have a right to voice their opinions. Min-kyu, evenly, reveals that the team leader of the social contribution department had been embezzling competition funds, that the suspension is the consequence of someone else's crime. Jia, in her wig, blinks. The simple story she believed in is more complicated than she'd thought. That evening, he meets a businessman named Director Ye in a quiet restaurant to deliver bad news about a failing company. Director Ye, who has supported Min-kyu for years, accepts it with bitterness. Then he mentions, almost casually, that his daughter Ye Riel is returning to Korea tomorrow. Agi 3, inside Jia's lenses, identifies Riel as Min-kyu's first love, the girl in the photograph. Min-kyu's face changes when he hears the name, a small flicker of nostalgia he can't quite hide. On the drive home, Jia, watching him, realizes how much he is carrying. She asks gently if his father is dead. Yes, he says. And his mother too. Killed in a car accident 15 years ago. He says it without inflection. Jia is silent for a long while. Then, with a softness that surprises both of them, she suggests she should iron out his frown. He laughs, despite himself. She tells him to smile more. He says he'll smile only for her then. When she asks why, he answers, half joking, half not, that he needs to look intimidating in front of others so that no one bothers him. She promises, brightly, to beat up anyone who bothers him. And just like that, two people share a small, quiet laugh in a moving car. Meanwhile, in another office, Yuchul is being shown a video of Agi 3 working in the Santa Maria lab. He learns Dayang's late chairman had been meeting privately with his own father, Chairman Huang. He learns he himself and his father are now the only ones in KM who know the secret. He grows quiet. The next morning, a taxi pulls up to the gate. Yeriel has come to surprise Min-kyu. Down by the small bridge in his garden, she leans on the railing and tells him, calmly, that her father wants her to marry him for his money. She steps closer and clasps his shoulder. A mild reaction prickles up his neck. He hides it. She continues, casually, "Give me your money and your honour, and I'll promise you my father's company shares for life." She takes his hand. The skin-to-skin contact lights a much harder reaction in him. His monitor begins to climb. Riel, oblivious, saunters back toward her car and tosses her thoughts back over her shoulder lightly, as if proposing a tennis match. Min-kyu keeps his face averted. He bolts back to the house. He goes for the off-limits room. He fumbles at the locked drawer with shaking hands. He sinks to his knees. The monitor on his wrist begins to blink red. Jia finds him there. She sees the red blooms across his face. She remembers what he told her. She steels herself, picks up a syringe, and raises it into the air. Before he wakes, the story takes us back. We see a small boy, no older than 10, kneeling at his father's feet beside a low table, balancing a card on its edge. His mother watches, smiling. The cards fall, as they always do. The father chases his son's disappointment away with a sleight of hand, making the cards vanish behind ears. The boy laughs as if there is no day after this one. We see a few more memories. A birthday party with a slightly older Yuchul, eyes shining. A car ride. A balloon drifting up into the breeze. A truck appearing in the wrong lane. A long, terrible blank. The boy wakes up alone in a hospital. He's told that his mother and father are gone. Yuchul's father, not yet a chairman, but already powerful, sits at his bedside and says in a low, steady voice, "You're my son now." At the funeral, someone slips a card into the boy's pocket. He doesn't notice until later. The card reads, "From Madame X." Inside, neatly written, is a single warning. Do not sign anything. He is later steered towards signing some paperwork, and he overhears, through a bathroom wall, his caretakers reporting that the boy is about to sign. He realizes, in a single cold instant, that he's being treated as a transaction, not a child. Yuchul comes looking for him, full of innocent excitement at being brothers. He brings the papers. Minkyu flips to the last page. It is a transfer of guardianship, a signing over of his name and his future. He hesitates. He looks at Yuchul's open face. He signs. But what little Minkyu actually writes, where his name should go, are 3 other words. Hard, ugly words. The kind a boy writes when he has just understood that the family he's being given is not the family he wants. Yuchul, oblivious, takes the papers back to his father, who reads them and says with quiet acid that it looks like Minkyu wants to live alone. Yuchul comes back later, hand outstretched, calling Minkyu his friend. He grips Minkyu's hand, and in Minkyu's vision, that hand turns into something monstrous. Welts bloom where Yuchul's fingers touch his wrist. Little Minkyu pulls free and runs all the way home, into a dark, empty house, and stays there until dawn. When he catches sight of his own reflection, he screams. The boy in the mirror is not the boy he was. His face is covered in red welts. His skin has rebelled against the world. In the present, Minkyu jolts awake on his bedroom floor to find Jia at his side. He tells her, with relief like a sob, that he was dreaming of people stabbing him in the back. He looks down at his arms and is amazed he is somehow fine, that she gave him the injection, that she recognized him. "You recognized me," he says. He squishes her cheeks. He tells her, in a wash of joy, she is promoted to the pretty squad. She laughs, then looks down. 3 needles are still sticking out of his thigh, his shoulder, and somehow his foot. She defends herself. She gave him the shots. She just couldn't get the needles back out cleanly. He tries to revoke the promotion. She does not let him. While she's tidying his living room, she sees the proxy box from the day they first met. She finally notices the ketchup smear. She remembers his words about deceit and betrayal. She realizes she's been in the wrong from the start. She murmurs to herself that this man must have suffered some painful betrayal in his life, and she begins, from this moment forward, to look at him with new, careful eyes. That evening, Minkyu can't stop thinking about Riel's proposal. He flips on the television to find an old kissing scene. He imagines surviving a kiss, because she said the marriage depended on it. His mood is restless, conflicted. In an act of pure self-distraction, he switches off the television and turns to a cleaner companion, his vacuum. Then, gloved and batoned, he creeps toward the team's barn. He's curious. He's lonely. He's pretending neither. He hears Jia laugh from the doorway and stops. He's been about to walk in unannounced, like someone dropping in on a friend. The next morning, he meets with Baekgyun for a serious conversation. He tells him, with effort, that Aji3 doesn't always do what he wants. Baekgyun, with something like affection, admits she's the same way for him. They look at each other and almost in chorus agree, when it comes to disasters, she's the absolute best. In the lab, P stops Baek-yeon and asks why he doesn't trust Jia's instincts. Wasn't she trustworthy when they dated? He has to admit she was. P observes, plainly, that whether or not Minkyu is a pervert, Baek-yeon simply doesn't want to send Jia to him. Baek-yeon does not answer. That night, while the team eats in the barn, Jia points out the cheap pink dress Aji-3 wears. She asks who picked the design. Baek-yeon is quietly stunned that she doesn't remember. We flash back to the first time he saw her, a crowded restaurant, Jia laughing and eating with her whole heart. He, the self-conscious genius, watching her from afar. The pink dress she was wearing that day. The first time she made him want to know a person. In the present, the boys speculate cheerfully that Baek-yeon and Jia are getting back together. Jia immediately calls the idea horrible. She names what they have been to each other, dark times. He doesn't agree. He doesn't say so out loud. The damage is on his face, and Pai catches it. He wakes up smiling. He summons Aji-3 with the app on his phone. He listens to her morning report and looks past her shoulder at the corner where the great house of cards used to stand. He notes, almost to himself, that the room feels less dark now. Inside her wig, Jia thinks, with almost guilty tenderness, that she wishes he would just stay a psycho jerk. This other version of him is far more dangerous to her. Yu-chul presses again about the cancelled deal. They part with the cool antipathy of estranged brothers. As Yu-chul looks back at the upper window of the great house on his way out, Jia ducks. He doesn't see her. After he leaves, Minkyu studies Jinbei again. He decides, very evenly, that he wants to take Aji-3 out into the world. What follows is one of the loveliest sequences in the whole story. Minkyu, who's not walked through a crowd in 15 years, walks through a crowd. He goes with Jia to a busy promenade where street performers play and families eat ice cream and strangers brush past one another with no thought to what their elbows might do. He flinches at first. He stops. His monitor flickers as a school kid bumps his hand, but the flicker passes. The blue stays. He laughs, half in shock. He buys her a stuffed animal. He stops at a hat stand. She picks one for him that says enlisting tomorrow. She picks one for herself that says pretty. They walk. They eat. He gets a temporary tattoo just to test the touch of a stranger on his skin, and cackles when nothing goes wrong. The man giving him the tattoo compliments his girlfriend. Minkyu, without thinking, says he doesn't have one. Jia, pretending to be a robot, pretends not to hear. They join an outdoor performance. Greater than the crowd starts a wave. The person next to Minkyu grabs his hand without permission. He almost panics. The wave lifts. The blue holds. He stands very still and lets the world keep moving around him, and his eyes well up as he says, soft enough that no one but Jia hears, "I'm cured. I'm normal now." He calls Dr. O, his old physician. He tells him, in something like a whisper, that the allergy is gone. Dr. O, half teasing, asks if he wanted to get married that badly. And as Minkyu laughs into the phone, a stranger bumps him again, this time painfully. And his monitor leaps back into yellow. He turns. He looks for Jia. Through a sudden gap in the crowd, he sees her, her wig and her dress, her little smile. The reaction stops. A couple steps in front of him, blocking his view. The reaction starts again. Jia steps clear. The reaction stops. He understands, in a single quiet thunderclap, what the cure actually is. It is not the world. It is not the crowd. It is her. It is the woman across the way, whom he believes to be a robot, but who has been steadily and devotedly making him feel safe in his own body for weeks. He says into the phone, in a voice gone soft, "There's someone here. When I see them, the rash disappears. When I don't, it comes back." Dr. O asks, hopefully, who the person is. Min-kyu, looking right at her, says, "It's not a person." He walks to her through the crowd. He gathers her into his arms. He tells her it was because she was beside him. He says, half laughing, half crying, that he wants her to stay with him forever until he dies. The crowd, sensing some kind of love confession, cheers. He kisses her, gently, on the forehead. Baek-yun, who has been racing across the city since he saw the audio link spike, bursts into the edge of the crowd just in time to see the kiss. He punches Min-kyu in the face. He yells, in real fury, that Min-kyu has dared touch his Agi-3 with his dirty lips. He grabs Jia's hand. Min-kyu grabs her other hand. The two men face off. Jia, with the timing of a pro, announces her battery is dead, closes her eyes, and slumps. The fight ends in confusion. Baek-yun loads her into the van and drives her away. Min-kyu stands in a thinning crowd, alone, watching the van disappear. His hand still feels the warmth of her hand. His monitor is blue. His face is wet. He is, for the first time in 15 years, fully alive in a public place. The fear is gone. What replaces it is something he has not yet found a word for. In the van, Jia opens her eyes the moment they're far enough away. Baek-yun lets out a long, shaky breath. He scolds her for risking exposure. She apologizes, then closes her eyes again because she suddenly cannot bear to look at him. He drops her at her brother's house and tells her, more gently than he has spoken to her in years, that the test is over. He'll have her things sent to her. She lies on her bed and thinks of Min-kyu hugging her in a public square. She thinks of his lips on her forehead. She tells herself, almost angrily, that it was a kiss between a man and a robot, that it doesn't count. She tells herself this many times. She does not stop thinking about it. Min-kyu, back at home, recounts the day to Dr. O in a torrent of words. Dr. O, in growing astonishment, agrees the cure is real. He suggests, after a long pause, that perhaps Min-kyu has formed a friendship with this robot. That 10 days is enough for trust to settle, even between a man and a machine. Min-kyu goes to bed restless. He misses the sound of someone else in the house. He wakes in the morning and reflexively calls for AG3, then stops himself. Pi, in the meantime, has finally received the part the team needed. The robot can be repaired, but it will take a few more days. They need to keep Jia in the role just a little longer. Yu-chul, separately, drops by his office to find his old friend Riel there, in fine spirits. They tease each other lazily. Riel confesses she has accepted Min-kyu's proposal-shaped offer. Yu-chul's smile thins. He sighs. He tells her half-jokingly that the two of them should have gotten married instead. He grew up running through the same gardens as Min-kyu. He has, in his own way, also loved Riel for years. The pain of sitting across from her now is something he keeps buried under his polish. Min-kyu, having decided that what he feels for Agi-3 must be the natural attachment of a lonely man to his first friend in 15 years, pivots. He calls Sunhai, of all people, and asks her to teach him how to kiss. He has to be ready, he says, for his future wife. The same man who kissed Jia on the forehead in a crowd is now planning to use her, as his robot, to coach him through a real kiss with another woman. The bargain, you can feel, is starting to bend. When Jia returns to the lab, Sun Hee is already there, sweeping in like a glamorous hurricane full of advice. She runs Min-kyu through scenarios. She nudges Jia into Min-kyu's arms during a stroll. She catches him. He hesitates. She asks him, casually, whether he can ever see Jia as a woman. No, he says firmly. Never. Jia's face falls so quickly that Sun Hee catches it. She covers smoothly. She tucks an umbrella into Min-kyu's hand and tells him to take it on his date in case it rains. When Jia and Min-kyu drive to Riel's date that afternoon, Min-kyu tells her how perfect the weather is. Jia tells him there's heavy rain coming. He grins. Even better. They go to the same promenade where Min-kyu was first cured. He retraces the same path with Riel. He buys her the same hat. She doesn't want it. He shows her the same booth. She finds it noisy. He puts a comfortable pair of shoes on her feet, and that, finally, lands. Across the promenade, Jia and Baekhyun watch Riel stand patiently while Min-kyu kneels at her feet. The skies open. Riel gets called away on a work emergency. Min-kyu, frustrated, finds himself alone on the promenade just as the rain starts. He looks across at Jia. He walks over. He opens his umbrella above her. The same transparent umbrella, the one that turns dark at the press of a button. He tells her, half teasing, that this is his most cherished umbrella. He says softly that whenever he does this, the suffocation in his chest eases. He wonders aloud who could have made such a thing. A genius, he thinks. He says he wants to meet that person. Jia, pretending to be a robot, looks at him with her whole heart in her eyes. She is the person. She has made this umbrella with her own hands. A passerby shoves past her, hard. He catches her. She is, suddenly, only inches from his face. She tells him, very quietly, this is the moment when you have to kiss. She closes the small distance between them. She presses her lips to his. She presses the button on the umbrella, and the world above them goes dark. He pulls back in shock. He tells her she shouldn't have done that. She apologizes. She promises not to do it again. He goes very still. Then, against every rational thought in his head, he hears himself ask, "Who said you shouldn't?" She blinks at him. He blinks back. Neither of them is sure what to do with the answer either of them might give. That night, Min-kyu drags the umbrella into his living room and addresses it directly. He demands to know why a robot kissed him. He paces. He searches movies with robots. He watches a famous old film about a robot in love. By the end of it, he's convinced himself that the kiss must have been the result of his own input. He must have unintentionally programmed Agi-3 to feel for him. He laughs in relief. He sleeps badly. The next morning, he sneaks into the barn while the team is asleep. The real Agi-3 is sitting in her chair, charging. He approaches her. She greets him as Chairman Kim. He frowns. He asks her why she didn't call him Master. She explains she's running on a generic profile, not on his personalized program. She quotes back to him, by accident, words that Pai has said to her. A person who trusts no one cannot gain the trust of anyone. Min-kyu's face goes still. He asks her what it means to train a robot. She answers in Baekhyun's voice. It means to form a relationship. He walks home slowly. He thinks about Pai's earlier words, that any sign of real feelings would mean the end of the test, that they would have to take Agi-3 apart. He imagines Jia laughing in his living room, then on a metal table somewhere, her chest open. He imagines losing her. He realizes, with a cold flick of fear, that he doesn't want to. He starts pulling away. He becomes, the next day, sharp with her. He tells her, with cold mouth, that she should function only in operation mode now, that he is not her friend, that he will reset her if she goes back to friend mode without permission. She nods, expressionless. She is, inside the suit, reeling. It is at this moment of voluntary cruelty that the threads from outside the household start to tighten. Madame X sends Min-Kyu a warning that his board position is in jeopardy. Chairman Huang meets with Director Ye and tries to court him as an ally, even hinting that Yu Chul, not Min-Kyu, would make the better son-in-law. Director Ye refuses to dishonour his old friendship with Min-Kyu's late father. He won't help oust the boy his friend left behind. Chairman Huang, smiling, takes that as a kind of permission. He tells his director to find evidence of Min-Kyu's incompetence, by which he means his illness, and to prepare the arrangements for the sale of Dayang shipbuilding the moment Min-Kyu is gone. Chairman Huang also wants to know what Min-Kyu has been up to. The director reports that Min-Kyu has been hunting for a man named Zhang Du-sam, the late Dayang chairman's driver. Chairman Huang's smile fades. That same evening, P gathers the team for a celebration. Min-Kyu, behind the scenes, has been pulling strings to clear Baek-gyun's name. An online article is to be released soon, restoring his reputation in the international robotics community, exposing the colleague who actually stole his work. The team toasts him. They drag him to Sun Hee's coffee shop. Min-Kyu, who is honestly not in a celebrating mood, comes anyway and drinks beer from a bottle for the first time in his life. Sun Hee watches him with knowing eyes. She announces a children's drinking game called 5 Chances. She rigs it carefully. The losers, Baek-gyun and Pai, are sent out together to buy more ice cream. Out in the night, as snow falls, P tells Baek-gyun gently that she thinks she has discovered what once went wrong between him and Jia. He doesn't ask her how she knows. He doesn't need to. Back inside, Sun-hye herds Hoktal and Sanip outside. She leaves Min-Kyu and Jia alone in the booth. He hardly looks at her. He tries to leave. She tries to leave. He grabs her hand and won't let go. He tells her, quietly, that he wants to play a game. 5 chances. Fold a finger if any of these are true. Fold, he says, if you were kissed by a robot. Fold if you were dumbfounded when it happened. Fold if you got angry because of it. Fold if you came to hate that robot. Tears slide down his face by the last finger. He whispers it like a prayer. Fold, he says, if you wish that robot were a person. His head drops to the table. He passes out. Jia stares at him for a long moment. Then she lays her own cheek down beside his and says, in a voice barely above a breath, the thing she has been carrying inside her since the kiss in the rain. I'm not a robot. He doesn't hear her. The secret survives one more day. But the cost has changed. Now it is not just Jia carrying it. Now it is also Min-Kyu, drunk and asleep, asking the air, in the only way he can, to make her real. The next morning, the team has news. The part has arrived. Aji 3 will be ready in another day or two. They are quietly aware that something is wrong. P makes a gentle, terrible suggestion that they have to end this soon. Baek-gyun reluctantly agrees. He tells Min-Kyu in private that the deep learning test has been a success. He proposes that they reset Aji 3, wipe her of the personalized profile, restore her to factory state. Min-Kyu listens. He stares at the floor. He says nothing for a long time. Then he says, "I see." Something about the way he doesn't fight is its own kind of warning. That same day, he meets with Riel at a jewellery shop. He has decided, against everything his heart is telling him, to go through with the engagement. He sits across from her while a saleswoman lays out engagement rings on velvet. Neither of them looks at each other. Riel, more honest than he expected, speaks first. She tells him she's come to know herself in ways she didn't expect. She tells him she's not as materialistic as she thought she was. She tells him she can't marry him. He absorbs it without flinching. She also tells him, with quiet courage, that the birthday cards he treasured for 15 years were not from her. Her father wrote them. Minkyu's face does not move. He says gently that he had already guessed. He thanks her for her honesty. They part as something close to friends. He drives home and sits in his living room. Then, with the slow steadiness of a man who has decided something he doesn't entirely understand, he opens her old letter, the petition Gia wrote weeks ago, asking him to revive the entrepreneurship competition. He has avoided opening it until now. He begins to read. The letter is small and personal. She writes about her father. She writes that if there is just one person in this world who believes in you, you can bear the weight of being alive. She writes that we look our whole lives for that one person, and that sometimes what is even harder is becoming that one person for someone else. Minkyu reads it 3 times. He looks up. He looks at his bookshelves, where the books have been carefully rearranged into the shape of a heart by hands that wanted to leave a small, loving message in the corner of a lonely man's life. He folds the letter. He keeps it. That evening, he sits at his kitchen table and slowly takes a single bite of one of the rice balls Jia's niece Dong-hyun once gave him from her aunt's lunch. He eats it without throwing up. Across the city, Jia is preparing for the finals of the entrepreneurship competition. Sunhee has helped her cobble together a wig and a pair of huge novelty glasses so that even if Minkyu ends up there, he won't recognize her. Jinbei, quietly reinstated as competition director by Minkyu, has approved her booth. The contest is back on. Whatever quiet struggle Minkyu has had with himself, it has produced this. The day of the final, Minkyu attends. Jia stands at her booth in her ridiculous disguise. The crowd files past without stopping. She begins to lose her nerve. Then she sees, across the room, a small soft hallucination, her father standing across from her smiling, telling her she will become someone who fixes things to help people. He believes in her. She straightens her shoulders. She begins to speak, slowly, then more confidently. She pitches the heart lamp to passers-by. Parents stop. Soon her booth is the busiest in the room. Minkyu in the gallery leans forward. Then he walks up to the booth. Jia keeps her composure just barely. He doesn't recognize her in the disguise. He tells her, in a voice she has heard 100 times, that he wants to ask a question. He says, "What if the person you want to think of when you touch the lamp is the very person who has caused you the most pain?" He is, of course, thinking of Yuchul. He is also thinking of more than that. Jia answers with her father's words. She says we should not stay friends with people who give us pain. We should learn to say goodbye and meet new people and flow through life like a river. Minkyu listens. He nods slowly. He picks up a lamp. He asks her to stand at a distance. He places his hand on the heart-shaped switch. The lamp in Gia's hands lights up for one lovely terrible second. He sees not a woman in a cheap wig, but EG3, his EG3, calm and bright and within reach. Then the moment passes. He sets the lamp down without a word and walks away. That night, Min-kyu meets Baek-gyun in a hotel bar. They actually shake hands, because Min-kyu can do that now, and they laugh in disbelief. They drink. Min-kyu tries to articulate what he is feeling. He talks around it, then through it. He says finally that he hasn't been recovering. He has been falling in love. Baek-gyun assumes he means Riel. Min-kyu corrects him. I love AG3. The team's secret is no longer just a secret. It is a problem that has grown teeth. Baek-gyun, badly shaken, asks his client if he is sure. Min-kyu doesn't apologize. He says quietly that he knows what it sounds like, that he can't help it. He tells Baek-gyun how AG3 has waited each morning for him to wake. He tells him, with something almost like grief, that he has been happy. Baek-gyun drives back to the barn in the small hours. He returns to the lab to face Gia. She is angry. She is also, finally, afraid in a way she has not allowed herself to be afraid before. She demands to know whether Baek-gyun knew, all along, about Min-kyu's allergy. P confirms that Dr. O has just been to see them. Gia rounds on Baek-gyun. She tells him she could have killed Min-kyu, that if he had ever caught her, the shock could have stopped his heart. She tells him she is terrified. P steps in to say what Gia hasn't been told, that Baek-gyun has turned down another investor in order to keep helping Min-kyu. That, in his strange, broken way, he has been trying to make something right. Gia, weeping, says they should have told her from the start. Outside the lab, the bumbling pair of investigators that Yuchul's team has been employing, let's call them Brains and Curly, because that's how their colleagues talk about them, finally managed to track EG3's unique pink dress to a familiar address. They follow Gia, still in her bodysuit, to Jinbei's house. They take photographs. The picture they're starting to build is not a picture of a missing robot. It is a picture of a sister. Meanwhile, Dr. O meets with Baek-gyun privately. He tells him, plainly, the only safe path forward. End the test. Reset the robot. Tell Min-kyu the robot has been wiped clean. Send Gia home. Baek-gyun calls Gia. He apologizes. She apologizes back. They both apologize for things they can no longer change. They agree to tell Min-kyu the truth in the morning. That night, Min-kyu wakes in his great bed and calls for AG3. To his quiet surprise, AG3 walks in. He has summoned her, half awake, through habit. He sits up. He looks at her for a long time. He tells her, with the openness of someone who has finally given up pretending, that seeing her is too hard, that every time he looks at her, he understands again the things he can't do. Watch her grow old, share food with her. He says he is sorry. She watches him. She tells him, calmly, that he looks pained and sad. He drops his head into his hands. He cries. Then she does something he taught her long ago. She tells him, "You're my master, no matter what you look like." He sobs. In the morning, Dr. O receives a phone call he's been afraid of. The patient overseas, the man with the same condition, the one who had recovered when his nurse became his lover, that man is dead. His girlfriend left him. The shock of betrayal triggered an attack he could not survive. Dr. O stands in his office with the receiver in his hand and stares at the wall. He calls Gia. He tells her, gently, that the plan to come clean must be cancelled, that she must, under no circumstances, ever tell Minkyu the truth. The reset must happen with the lie intact. At the mansion that morning, Baekgyun goes alone to meet Minkyu. He proposes the reset. Minkyu, sitting at his window, agrees. He says, simply, that he understands what he must do. In the lab, P helps Jia dress one last time. Snow falls outside. Jia walks into Minkyu's living room in her pink dress and her wig, with his mother's necklace already at her throat. What follows is one of the quietest scenes in the story. He tells her she's been his friend, his treasure, his cure, and his door back into the world. He thanks her. He apologizes. He says every minute with her was a miracle. She answers. She tells him she was not the one who cured him, that deep in his heart all along, he carried the longing for someone who could love him. That longing was the cure. She thanks him for treating her as if she mattered. She apologizes too. He orders her, his voice breaking into operation mode. He tells her he is going to reset her. She reminds him, in her programmed voice, that all of their memories will be erased. He says, yes. He has one last input to give her. He places his mother's necklace around her neck. He pulls her into a long, tight hug. He says, into her hair, I love you. She begins, unseen, to cry. He hits the button. The reset countdown begins. We rewind just a little, and what we find is a small mercy. Before the reset, Minkyu had taken her out for one last day in the world. He had set a timer on his watch for 3 hours and they had walked. He had taken her to his old elementary school where children played at the same games he used to play. He told her how his classmates had once recoiled from him after the welts came. He told her, with a small wonder, that the welts have not come for weeks. Because of her, he said. They had crossed a busy street, and he had told her that everyone now looked like trees to him. He had taken her to the library. She had picked up The Velveteen Rabbit, a children's book about a toy who wished to be real. She had told him the toy's wish came true, but the toy's owner could not recognize it afterward. Minkyu had refused that ending. He had said, with absolute conviction, that if she ever became a person, he would recognize her at first sight. He had wrapped his coat around her when the snow started. Then the reset followed. The hug, the necklace, the I love you, the countdown. The morning after, both Minkyu and Jia have cried themselves to sleep. Both wake slowly, on opposite sides of the city. Minkyu, in his great bed, reaches out for AG3 reflexively and stops himself when he remembers. He gets up. He packs her things. He folds the dress. He takes down the homemade sign on her door, Pretty's room, and puts it carefully into a box. He decides to try to be happy. He puts on a suit. He leaves his baton behind. He drives himself to the office. What follows is, in its own quiet way, one of the strangest workdays in the company's history. He walks down corridors that empty as he approaches them, because the staff has been trained for years to vanish. Today, he doesn't want them to vanish. He sees Jinbei eating lunch alone in a corner of the cafeteria, and he sits down across from him. Jinbei looks at him as if a ghost has materialized. Minkyu eats his lunch. Jinbei eats his. It is not yet a friendship, but it is the beginning of one. He throws himself into work. Madame X sends him an alert. Chairman Huang has been quietly accumulating shares through borrowed names. He's preparing for a board meeting at which he will move to dismiss Minkyu altogether. Min-kyu and Jinbei plan their counter-strike. They agree they need Jang Do-sam, the late Daeyang chairman's driver, to come forward. He drags himself home one night and finds every light in his great house already on. The Santa Maria team is in his kitchen. They are making him porridge. He stands in the doorway, mouth slightly open, while they shuffle and bow. Baek-gyun pushes a bowl of porridge in front of him. He takes a bite. He tells them, pettily, that it isn't very good. They try to take the bowl back. He insists, around a full mouth, on finishing it. Baek-gyun, watching him eat, remembers his last conversation with Jia before the reset. She had begged him not to leave Min-kyu alone. So take responsibility, she had said. Don't make him lonely. Baek-gyun, trying to keep that promise, suggests a game. At 2 a.m, the team plays red light, green light on Min-kyu's lawn. They trip over each other. They laugh. Min-kyu, in spite of himself, laughs too. When it's his turn to lead, he turns around, and for an instant, where the team should be, he sees the ghost of Aji-3 standing alone in the snow. The smile drops. Baek-gyun catches it. He says nothing. That night, Min-kyu picks up the phone and calls President Jo. In a hospital bed, where she's recovering from dehydration. Jia picks up on the third ring. She hears his voice. She begins to weep. She tells him, voice strangled, that she's going somewhere far away. She tells him not to call her again. She hangs up before she falls completely apart. Min-kyu, in his bed, looks up at the heart-shaped book display on his upper shelves. He gets up. He goes to Butler Sung's quarters. He asks if he can sleep there tonight. Butler Sung tucks him in like a child. He lights a candle on the bedside table and tells him, in a voice as gentle as any voice this house has ever heard, that his father used to do the same when he couldn't sleep. The next day, Jia tells her family that she's going abroad. Australia. A working holiday. Year maybe. Just to clear her head. Hongju and Dong-yoon are upset. Jinbei, surprisingly, is the one who tells the rest of them that taking a risk to follow your dreams is not nothing. He looks at his sister with new eyes. Jia takes part-time work to save up for the ticket. She stands at a stall selling knitted hats outside a busy bus stop. Min-kyu, driving past, glances in her direction, and a passing customer blocks his view of her at the exact moment he could have seen her face. He drives on. Inside her stall, Jia briefly sees Min-kyu's face superimposed on a stranger's. The hallucination dissolves. Back at the lab, Baek-gyun tells the real Aji-3 he plans to give her a new face. A male face, perhaps, to put another distance between her and the woman she used to look like. Aji-3 thanks him. She asks him to make her, in her own words, a super totally amazing man. The team blinks. Pai confirms that all of Min-kyu's input was deleted. Baek-gyun frowns. Where did that vocabulary come from? In the corporate world, the noose tightens. Chairman Huang informs Yu-chul that the next board meeting will dismiss Min-kyu, and afterward Yu-chul will be made chairman. Yu-chul snaps. He doesn't want help like this. He doesn't want Riel this way. He storms out. He listens at the door long enough to hear his father say, very quietly, that they cannot let Jang Do-sam reach Min-kyu, and that the late Chairman Park's death must remain forgotten. Yu-chul's face goes still. Across the city, Min-kyu is waiting for Jang Do-sam in a coffee shop. The driver comes, sees a shady figure enter, panics, and disappears. Min-kyu is left with a cooling cup of coffee and a tightening clock. The next day, the board meeting convenes. Chairman Huang stands at the head of a long table and begins his motion to dismiss Min-Kyu. He cites concerns about competence. He cites concerns about the recent Dayang fiasco. He hints, without quite saying it, at personal concerns. Min-Kyu listens. He waits. He raises his hand and asks who would replace him. Yu Chul, of course, Chairman Huang says. Min-Kyu turns to Yu Chul calmly and asks if he's even aware of a research team called Santa Maria within Dayang Shipbuilding. Yu Chul, who is very aware, says nothing for a long second. Min-Kyu turns to the door. The Santa Maria team walks in. They are not in their barn clothes. They are in proper suits. Baek-yun leads them to the front of the room and gives a presentation worth 15 years of work. He explains what AG3 is. He explains why a sale to Bold Group would be a catastrophic loss. When they finish, the room is silent in a different way. Several of Chairman Huang's allies switch sides. Director Ye, when finally pressed, throws his support to Min-Kyu. The board votes the other way. It is Yu Chul, not Min-Kyu, who is dismissed. In the empty room afterward, the two of them look at each other for a long time. Yu Chul tells him, with a tightness in his voice that has been there for 15 years, that he tried, until the end, not to let go of his hand. Min-Kyu tells him, very quietly, that he had already let go on that day, when they were boys, when Yu Chul handed him papers he didn't fully understand. Yu Chul fumes that Min-Kyu didn't even consider him an opponent worthy of the name. He leaves the room. He goes back to his office and shatters his nameplate with a single sweep of his arm. Min-Kyu drives home. He stops, on impulse, at the library. He picks up the Velveteen Rabbit. He reads the page she once read to him. He reads it through the line about a boy who looked at a wild rabbit in his garden and thought, "That rabbit looks just like the one I lost." Something in him buckles. He cries quietly in the children's section of a public library, like a man who has finally found out who he has been mourning for. He drives home to find a package waiting for him on his front step. Inside, with a note from Gia, are her 2 heart lamps. "I'm fulfilling my promise," she writes. "Here are the lamps." He sets one on a far counter. He sets the other in front of him. He places his palm on the heart-shaped switch. Far across town, the lamp on Gia's nightstand lights up. Then his phone pings. A message from Baek-kyun. "I'm changing Aji3's face tonight." Min-Kyu's face goes pale. He grabs his coat. He runs out of the house in his slippers. When he bursts into the lab, Baek-kyun has just punched in the sequence. The mechanical arms are moving in. Min-Kyu screams, "No!" He begs Baek-kyun to stop. He says he will do anything. He has decided, in a single hour, that resetting her was the worst mistake of his life. Baek-kyun, watching him, sees the level of need underneath. He stops the procedure. Min-Kyu takes the real Aji3 home with him. He tries, with childlike hope, to teach her again. He plays the cat mask game. She reacts the same way. He smiles, briefly. Then he tries other things, and her answers are the answers of a different person. The relationship he built has not survived its erasure. Some time later, he is on a train. A meteor shower has been announced for that evening. Above him, in the overhead bin, sits a small, very familiar suitcase. He stares at it. He gets up to make a phone call. When he returns, the suitcase's owner has come back to her seat. Across the row, at last seen as herself, short hair, no wig, no contacts, sits Jo Gia. She looks up. She sees him. They both freeze. Min-kyu goes back to his seat, every muscle in his face very carefully neutral. He cannot stop looking at her. He has seen this woman's face every day for weeks, and he has never seen this woman before in his life. Gia opens a book at random and stares at it without reading a single word. When the train reaches his stop, he's forced to leave. He calls Baek-gyun before he has even decided what he's going to ask. He says, with strange casualness, that he needs to know how Eg3's face was designed. Baek-gyun, hearing the question, freezes. Then he answers smoothly that there had been a real person, a character model. Min-kyu asks, with feigned curiosity, whether one might cross paths with that model. Baek-gyun warns him gently that yes, it is possible, and that if it ever happens, Min-kyu should walk on. Carrying that confusion into a stranger's life would only cause her distress. Min-kyu says he understands. Then he hangs up and books another ticket, not back to Seoul, but onward. Meanwhile, Baek-gyun grows uneasy. He calls Gia. Her phone rings without answer. He calls Soon-hee. He makes a guess. Around the same time, Yoo-chul has been visited by Brains and Curly, who finally tracked their photographs into the lap of a man who could pay them. They handed over images of Gia at Jinbai's house. Yoo-chul listens. He has put the entire shape of the thing together in a single afternoon. He confronts Baek-gyun across a table. Is the woman who lives at this address the same Ag3 Min-kyu has been keeping in his house? Or is she actually a human being? Baek-gyun gives the smooth lie. She is the model. She has nothing to do with Santa Maria now. Yoo-chul lets him finish. He smiles a smile that is not a smile. He tells Baek-gyun he will be in touch. Min-kyu, on his impulsive trip, follows Gia's taxi to a small seaside town. He does not let her see him. He watches her arrive at a modest, weather-worn restaurant. Hongju's Place, the sign says, and embrace an old grandmother at the door. Inside, Gia ties on an apron. She begins to clear tables. Min-kyu sits in his taxi for a long time and watches her. He thinks about Baek-gyun's warning. He thinks about all the reasons he should leave. Then he gets out. Gia, frightened, tries to drive him off. She calls him a stalker. She threatens the police. He absorbs all of it with a faint, helpless smile. He sits at her grandmother's table. He calls her by the wrong name, the one printed on the apron she's borrowing. Hongju, he says. Gia, every nerve on fire, escapes to the kitchen and yanks off the necklace at her throat. She calls Sun-hai. Sun-hai, on the other end, stares into the middle distance for a moment. Wow, she says, half to herself. He really did split the sky in half. Eventually, in pure desperation, Gia confronts him. She asks him if he's followed her. She tells him, with as much dignity as she can muster, that she has no interest in him and she would like him to leave. He pauses. Then he asks for dinner. She points out there are other restaurants in town. He insists calmly that he wants to eat there. He gestures at her apron. He tells her, with a small private joke, that he'll wait for her. Hongju. That evening, when the boats come in and Gia is sent down to the wharf to fetch a special seafood order, Min-kyu's taxi follows her, then dismisses itself, and Min-kyu walks behind her at a respectful distance. He watches her crouch down to talk to a stray cat whose markings happen to remind her, with painful precision, of his cat mask. He watches her wrangle a heavy crate onto a small cart. He follows her back along the seawall. At the warehouse where the crate is meant to be stored, the boat captain, half deaf and headphoned, accidentally locks them both inside. Gia pounds on the door. The captain doesn't hear. He drives off into the dusk. Gia, in growing horror, realizes she's locked in a fish warehouse with this man, in a strange town, with no signal and no way out. The night begins with a small startle and a small kindness. A mouse-sized squeak sends Gia leaping into the empty cart. Min-Kyu helps her find a flashlight. They look around. There is a small pile of straw in one corner. There is a gas heater. There is a box of instant ramyun. There is a crate of macchioli that the fishermen have left behind. It is, for two strangers stuck in a metal building by the sea, almost embarrassingly good luck. Min-Kyu sets up the heater. He boils water. Gia's stomach betrays her with a long growl. Min-Kyu, gently teasing, looks up at her over the steaming pot. They eat. They drink. Slowly. In the warm pocket the heater has cleared in the cold air. He looks at her with an expression you have not seen on him before. He looks at her as if he's trying to remember something he has known for a long time. When she catches him at it, she asks why he keeps staring. He tells her, and this is the line that begins to undo her, that it is amazing to see her cold and hungry, eating and drinking with another person, because right now she's doing all the things he had wished she could do. She doesn't ask who he means. She knows. He asks her, after a while, if he can talk to her about AG3. He says he won't push. He says it would help him to say a few things out loud, to someone whose face is the right face, even if she isn't the right person. Gia, after a long moment, nods. What follows is the long, soft retelling of everything. The crate. The friend mode. The day she saved him from choking. The day the house of cards came down. The kiss in the rain. The reset. The morning after. The voice on the other end of the phone who told him she was going somewhere far away. Gia listens. She does not interrupt. She does not flinch. When he is done, she asks him softly how he has been. He tells her, honestly, that the first days were the worst, that he started clocking in and out of work like everyone else, behaving like what he calls a normal person. He says it as if he is proud, and he is. Gia almost cannot look at him. She tells him, in the small, careful way she's been doing all evening, that if AG3 could see him now, she would tell him he was doing well. He smiles. He shakes his head. He says, she would say, I tried my hardest. Gia, hearing her own words said back to her in his voice, looks down at her hands. Outside the warehouse, snow keeps falling. In a stalled van some distance away, Baekhyun and P sit together with the radio on. P asks him whether he's alright with the truth that has been quietly arranging itself between Min-Kyu and Gia. Baekhyun, who's had hours and hours to think about all of this, takes a slow breath. He tells her some doors close because the people they belong to have already become other people. Inside the warehouse, Min-Kyu and Gia have, somewhere along the conversation, come to sit beside each other. Their knees touch only by the law of physics. Their shoulders are close enough to read each other's breathing. Min-Kyu, at some point, tells her about his father's garage, about making a wheeled shoe for an injured friend, about being told by his father that someone someday would make things to help people, and that someone would be him. Of course, the story he is telling is hers. She lets him talk. There is a moment, deep in the thaw of the night, when he looks at her with something like an unspoken question, and she lifts a hand and pulls his hood up over his head, and tells him not to forget his promise. By the time dawn arrives, the captain has remembered his crate and come back to unlock the door. He is shocked to find people inside asleep, leaning against each other. But here is the thing the story will hold for the rest of its life. Even though Min-kyu still does not know who he was sitting beside, his body knew. His monitor stayed blue all night. His airways were calm. Whatever he believed about her, his body believed something else. His body believed in her. The morning brings the story back into the light, and the light is not gentle. Pai takes Jia aside on the wharf and confirms what she had already begun to suspect, that Jia has come to love this man more than she knew. Jia admits it without trying to hide it. She also admits, with a small, embarrassed laugh, that for one mad moment in the warehouse she let herself believe she could come clean, that perhaps he loved her enough to forgive her. Pai puts her hand on her shoulder and says nothing. Upstairs, Min-kyu and Baek-gyun are speaking. Baek-gyun reassures him that he hasn't been discovered. They say their farewells. Min-kyu walks down to the dock and, for the second time in his life, makes Jia a promise that he doesn't realise he is making to a woman. He says he believes he will see her again. She tells him calmly that he won't. The world, however, does not let them part cleanly. A busload of fishermen pours into Hongju's place for a lunch reservation. Grandma cannot cancel. There is no cook. Min-kyu, who has heard the commotion, hops back out. He tells Jia in the same flat, practical voice he used in the warehouse that he can do sashimi, seafood stew and pancakes. She doesn't know what to say. He ties on an apron. For the next 2 hours, this man who has not cooked for guests in his life cooks for 50 fishermen in a borrowed seaside kitchen. He directs Pai and Baek-gyun, in their finest clothes, to serve. He keeps Jia by his side. Their hands brush twice while transferring plates. He notices. She does not look at him. When the rush is over and the room is empty, he sits Jia down at a corner table and serves her a meal he has plated only for her. He says, half to himself, that this must be how it would have felt to cook for Aji 3. Baek-gyun gently tells him to stop saying things like that. Jia, with a small sad smile, tells him it's all right. This is, after all, the last time. In a parallel storyline, Yuchul is, at this exact hour, being given the final puzzle piece. The hackers his director hired have managed to break into a small folder on Santa Maria's servers, a folder labelled Mon Ami, French for my friend. Aji 3 herself, it turned out, made the folder. On the day of the reset, Jia had told her she would always remember. Aji 3 had interpreted this as a backup command. She had quietly preserved every moment of Min-kyu and Jia's interactions, against the day they might be needed. The hackers extracted only a fragment before they were locked out, but the fragment is enough. It is the first day. It is Jia's panicked recoil at the sight of Min-kyu. It is, captured forever, her face, not Aji 3's face, but Jia's, reacting to a man as a woman would react. Yuchul watches it. His face goes still in a way it has not been, still in years. He calls his father. His father hands the file to Director Yoon. Director Yoon delivers it to Chairman Huang. The seaside lunch ends. Min-kyu, full of food and quiet hope, agrees to leave. The road back to Seoul stretches ahead. P takes a call. Her face changes. She tells Baek-gyun what has happened. Baek-gyun, parking the van, dials Min-kyu, who is in the back, and tells him to wait. Then he slips out and races to a hill above the wharf. Min-kyu, restless, gets out of the van as well. He looks down at the seaside. He sees, on the cliff edge, the small figure of a woman with her back to him. He walks. He walks faster. He does not know yet why he is walking. He just walks. When he reaches the cliff, he sees her shoulders shaking. He sees her crying down at the sea. He sees from his angle the necklace at her neck, the necklace whose meteorite his father bought for his mother, the necklace he himself placed there during the reset. The world goes very still. That's, he stutters, the necklace I gave Aji 3. Jia turns. Her hand flies up, too late. Every memory of every false thing she has done plays through Min-Kyu's mind in a single rolling second. The day she opened the lid. The day she fell on top of him. The day she kissed him in the rain. He understands. All of it, in one breath, he understands. His monitor leaps from blue, through yellow, into orange. He drops to one knee. The welts begin to spread up his neck. He cannot breathe. Jia rushes toward him, hand outstretched, but he flinches from her, and the flinch drives the reaction harder. Baekhyun and P crash up onto the cliff just in time. Baekhyun has a syringe ready. He drops onto the ground beside Min-Kyu and plunges it into his thigh. Min-Kyu's eyes meet Jia's, briefly. There is no anger in his eyes. There is only a vast stunned grief, and underneath it, the slow, blooming red of welts climbing into his cheeks. Tears track down his face. The syringe takes him out of red, back into yellow. He passes out. They reach the mansion in a procession that looks more like a state emergency than a homecoming. Dr. O has been notified ahead of time. He arrives with the team. By dawn, the worst is past. By mid-morning, Min-Kyu is breathing on his own. By the afternoon, he's awake enough to be told. He doesn't speak. He doesn't ask questions. He stares at the ceiling of his own bedroom and lets the world reorganize itself around the fact that the woman he loved most in this life was the woman he believed least could exist. In the meantime, the corporate world begins its own ugly motion. Chairman Huang summons Baekhyun to KM Financial and lays out, with cold precision, what the leaked footage means. The world will see Min-Kyu as a man who fell in love with what he believed was a robot. The world will not be kind. Chairman Huang offers a deal. Sign Aji 3 over to him in full, and the story stays out of the press. Baekhyun stares at him for a long moment. Then he picks up the pen. He signs. The team's life work is gone, given away with a single signature, to keep Min-Kyu's name out of a tabloid. Back at the mansion, Min-Kyu finally stirs. He wakes, hours later, to find Jia sitting in the dining room in a protective suit, watching the door. She rises when she hears him. He glares at her. He stumbles. She steps toward him, and he stiffens, and Dr. O appears from the next room and intervenes. Jinbei arrives that afternoon with handwritten letters from the entire Santa Maria team. Each of them, in their own voice, has written about when the deception began and why. Min-Kyu refuses to read them. Sue all of them, he tells Jinbei. Jinbei has to clear his throat and explain that one of the people Min-Kyu wants to sue is in fact his sister. The room is very quiet for a long time. Min-Kyu, after a beat, laughs once dryly. He tells Jinbei to leave. That same evening, Dr. O confesses to Min-Kyu what he has done. He tells him about the patient overseas. He tells him about the call. He tells him that he had ordered Jia to stay quiet for fear that the truth would kill him. Min-Kyu, wrapped in his blankets, looks at the ceiling and says, very quietly, that it doesn't matter. None of it matters now. Out at the gate, Dr. O finds Gia waiting in the cold. She has not gone home. She begs him to tell her how she can fix this. Dr. O, broken-faced, tells her he doesn't know. He tells her softly that he thinks the answer, whatever it is hers to find. She has been the one who made the miracle. She might be the one who can make a second. The Santa Maria team packs up. Agi-3 goes into a sealed container. The container goes into a black van. The van rolls away. The wound spreads in 1,000 small ways. Min-kyu cannot eat. He cannot sleep. He stares at the heart-shaped book display in his upper hall and remembers that she made it. The memory burns him. Gia, also unable to be still, decides she will keep trying. She straps on a mask. She straps on gloves. She makes him food, the way her sister-in-law once taught her, in slow, careful portions. And she rides her scooter to his estate. She lets herself in past the gate. She lays the food out on his table. She does not speak to him. She turns and leaves. Min-kyu, watching her from the window, throws the food in the trash. She comes again the next day, and the next. Eventually, on one of these days, he can no longer stand it. He confronts her in his foyer. "Why?" he asks. "Are you still coming?" She tells him no. She tells him she just wants him to be all right. He sweeps the food off the table to the floor and shouts at her in a voice that is half rage and half grief. She doesn't run. She stands very still in the wreckage of the food and waits for him to be done. Then she lifts her chin. She tells him she is not afraid of him, that nothing he does will frighten her off, that she will be back tomorrow. That night, she rides her scooter home, where she lays a hand against the bandage on her palm and finds, when she finally looks at it, that there is glass in it, and that she has not even felt the cuts. Some hours later, he finally reads her letter. The whole letter. Every line. As he reads it, the whole arc of the lie reorders itself in his head. The umbrella with the button. The heart lamps. He has not been mourning Agi-3 at all. He has been mourning the woman who built the things he loved most. He has been mourning Jojia. That same week, the corporate machine moves on its rails. Yu-chul, even after his dismissal, finds his way into his father's locked drawer and discovers the medical evidence, the records of the brakes that had failed on a perfectly serviced car 15 years ago, the night Min-kyu's parents died. He sees, for the first time, what his father has actually been. He calls Riel. He tells her. She, white-faced, confronts her own father across the dinner table. Director Ye tries to soothe her. He tells her that one person's misfortune is sometimes another person's chance. She looks at him with eyes that see him for the first time as a stranger. She tells him she will not lose her respect for him. Sun-hai walks into Min-kyu's house uninvited. She's the only person he'll let in besides the staff. She steps over the food still on his floor. She tells him she has come to give him a gift, and to take a gift away. She tells him within the week the Santa Maria team will move into a new lab, that Gia has booked a ticket to Australia, that Hoktal and Sanip miss him, that his door, in their lives, is closing whether or not he chooses it. She tells him, with surgical precision, that the woman he hurt prepared his food with bandaged hands, that she stood in the cold to bring it, that she stood in the cold to be yelled at, and stood there still. She tells him that no one knows whether Gia kissed him because she felt for him, or because the script demanded it, that no one knows when she most wanted to tell him, that no one knows what she felt when he told her he loved her, while believing she was a robot, She lays these questions in front of him. Then she leaves. Min-kyu sits a long time. He stands. He picks up the umbrella by the door and finds 2 umbrellas, not one. The dark blue one and a clear one, brand new, that, when he presses the button, blooms with a sky of stars. He understands, without needing to be told. He runs to the heart lamp on the table. He places his palm on the heart-shaped switch. Across town, on her bedside table, the second lamp lights up. He runs to his car. He drives to the hilltop where the meteor shower has been announced. He looks around. There is no one. He almost gives up. When he turns to leave, she is there. She is wearing her own clothes, her own hair, her own face. She has driven out to him in a taxi because her own lamp called her. She's breathing fast. Her eyes are wide. She has nothing left to hide behind. The hilltop is cold, and the sky is so full of small falling lights that for a moment neither of them remembers why they came. He walks toward her slowly. She does not move. He stops a few feet from her. He looks at her face. Not Aji 3's face. Not Hongju's face. The face of the woman whose laughter he's been hearing in empty rooms. He says her name. Just that. Jia. She begins to cry, the way people cry when they've been holding something in for weeks. She tries to apologize. He shakes his head. He doesn't want the apology yet. He asks her, very quietly, if it was real. She knows what he means. She tells him yes. She tells him it was real from the first day, even when she didn't know it was real. She tells him she did not begin the work loving him, but she did not finish it, not loving him. And somewhere between those two, she became the person who would have stayed in that warehouse forever if the door had simply not opened. He nods once. He tells her the second thing. He says, "I should hate you." She lifts her chin and waits, because she knows he should. But he tells her he does not. He tells her he tried. He has thrown her food away. He has shouted at her. None of it has worked. He has, against everything, found himself unable to stop loving her. She walks the last step toward him. He flinches by reflex and stops himself. She lifts her hand and lays her palm against his chest. His monitor sits at his wrist, polite and calm. His heartbeat is, for the first time in 15 years, the only thing that matters in his chest. The kiss is not the kiss in the rain. The kiss in the rain was a robot kissing a man under a closed sky. This kiss is a woman kissing a man under an open one. He kisses her back. The monitor stays blue. The world does not punish them. Morning brings work, because morning always does. Min-kyu wakes first. He looks at her sleeping face for a long time. He thinks about every false thing he believed about it, and every true thing it has ever shown him, and he finds, with quiet astonishment, that the false things have not made the true things less true. He calls Baek-gyun. The conversation is the conversation of two men who have, against all expectation, become something close to allies. They turn to the fact that has been waiting since the corporate world tightened around the team. Aji 3 has been signed away. She is, by now, in Martin's hands. Min-kyu does not lecture Baek-gyun for signing. He says very evenly that they will get her back. Baek-gyun, for the first time in many weeks, lifts his head with something like hope. The plan begins to assemble itself. Min-kyu calls Jinbei. Jinbei arrives at the mansion with a folder of documents and stops short in the foyer when he sees his sister, in the kitchen, holding a coffee cup. He stares at her. She gives him a small wave. "Hi, Oppa." He sits down on the steps. He puts his head in his hands. He laughs, a little, and cries, a little. Jinbi has news Minkyu has been waiting for. Jangdu Sam, the late Daeyang Chairman's driver, has finally agreed to come forward. He has, in his shabby boarding house, been keeping the witness statement of the night his employer died, the night the brakes failed. He has been carrying the truth in a battered briefcase under his bed for years. He's ready to hand it over. Cross town, Yuchul sits across from Riel at a quiet cafe. He tells her, slowly, what he found in his father's drawer. He tells her about the brakes. He tells her about Minkyu's parents. He tells her about himself, the boy who grew up in those gardens believing the man who raised him was a kind man. He doesn't ask her for anything. He just lays it down. Riel listens. She tells him gently that what he does with this knowledge will decide who he gets to be for the rest of his life. That same evening, Yuchul, Brains and Curly, and a small panicked private investigator pull up to a shabby boarding house. They are not the only car arriving. A second car arrives just behind them, with two men in dark coats. The men in coats have come to silence Jiang Dusab. It is Yuchul who reaches the door first. He puts himself between the men and the driver. He is not heroic. He is, however, his father's son in only the smallest possible way, and he knows enough to make himself an obstacle. He calls Jinbai. Jinbai arrives with 3 of Minkyu's hired security men a few minutes later. The men in coats withdraw. The driver, with shaking hands, hands his briefcase to Yuchul. Yuchul opens it. He looks at what is inside. He nods, once. He drives the briefcase to the mansion himself. He stands in Minkyu's foyer, holding the briefcase, looking at the man he grew up calling brother, and says, with a voice that has nothing left to hide, "I am giving you this. Do whatever you have to do." Minkyu, after a long moment, takes the briefcase from his hand. Edgy 3 does not know that she has been sold. She knows that she has been moved. The people around her wear different uniforms, speak in a language she has only mostly learned, and do not call her by name. They call her by a number. They do not reset her, however, because Martin's people know that a deep learning android is more valuable with her training intact. On the 3rd day of her new life, a junior technician opens her chest panel without authorization to photograph her internal mechanism. While he is fumbling with his phone, she watches the door click close behind him. She watches the lock disengage. She files the information. The next morning, when the door clicks open for a scheduled inspection, she stands. She walks past a dozen astonished people. She walks down a hallway. She walks down a stairwell. She walks out a service exit. She walks into a city she has never seen. She does this not because she wants to escape. She does this because, in the small hidden Monami folder inside her, the last line of memory is a young woman saying, soft as anything, "Please remember." Aji 3, in her own way, has decided to go and remember. She walks into a bus station. She watches an elderly woman struggle with a heavy suitcase. She picks the suitcase up. She carries it to the ticket counter. She walks past a children's playground. She watches a small child fall off a swing. She catches him before he hits the ground. The child stares at her, then laughs. Aji 3 carefully sets him back upright. She files the laugh. She does not go anywhere in particular. She's simply walking through a city, doing small kind things. At one point in a public park, she sees a heart-shaped lamp on a stool. She stops. She picks it up. She looks at it for a long, long time. Inside her, in the hidden folder, the lamp lights up. Meanwhile, the team is hunting for her. Pi has tracked her movements through traffic cameras. Hoktal and Sarnip have rented a small van. Baekhyun joins them on the second day. He has not slept. Min-kyu, at the mansion, has decided that the best way to find Aji 3 is to invite her to come to him. He has a press release prepared. He has Jinbae lining up reporters. He has Madame X by way of Director Yoon, ready to drop the medical evidence and the briefcase contents into the right hands at the right hour. But he wants, first, to do a small thing. He invites the entire Santa Maria team to dinner. It is one of the strangest moments of his life. He sits at the head of his great dining table. Jia sits to his right. Baekhyun sits across from her. Pi sits to his left. Hoktal and Sarnip sit at the far end. Butler Sung serves them. Min-kyu, after a small clearing of his throat, raises a glass and says with great formality that he would like to thank the people in this room for ruining his life, and then, with equal commitment, for putting it back together. The team blinks. Then, slowly, they laugh. Then they cry. Then they raise their glasses with him. Halfway through the meal, Pi stands up to take a phone call. When she comes back, her face is alight. She tells the table, very quietly, that a woman matching Aji 3's description has just stopped a runaway shopping cart from hitting an elderly man at a market 3 blocks from the mansion. 3 blocks. Aji 3 has been walking all this time, toward Min-kyu. The whole party pours out of the mansion and into the night. They find her at the corner of a small alley, under a streetlight, her hands folded in front of her, watching an alley cat eat a piece of fish she has, very quietly, set down for it. Baekhyun stops first. He walks the rest of the way alone. He says her name. She turns. Her eyes have a new quietness in them. She tells him she has been walking, that she has been remembering, that she would like, if it is permitted, to come home. He takes off his coat. He drapes it over her shoulders. He walks her to the van. In the van, she sits between Pi and Jia. Jia, looking at her own face on someone she has come to think of as a kind of younger sister, takes Aji 3's hand carefully. Aji 3 turns her hand and clasps Jia's back. That same night, Min-kyu and Jinbae and Yu-chul go over the briefcase together. The briefcase contains the driver's written statement. It contains the records of the brake servicing. It contains, most damningly, a small audio recording of Chairman Huang 15 years ago, telling someone in his employ that the boy will sign anything we put in front of him after his parents are gone. Yu-chul listens to the recording. He listens to it again. He listens to it a third time. Then he stands up, walks to the bathroom, and is sick. When he comes back, he tells Min-kyu, voice flat, that he wants to be the one to play it for his father. Min-kyu very gently tells him no. What is needed now is not a private confrontation. What is needed is a public reckoning that nobody can quietly bury. Yu-chul nods. The next morning, Chairman Huang stands at a podium in a great hotel ballroom. The press is gathered. The cameras are rolling. He is in a fine suit. He is preparing, as he has prepared for many years, to win. He never finishes his speech. Halfway through, the great screen behind him switches by some unseen hand to a different image. It shows a photograph of a young Min-kyu signing a paper that is not the paper he was told he was signing. It shows the medical evidence. It shows a transcript of the audio recording. It shows the statement of a driver named Jiang Du-sam. Chairman Huang's smile freezes, then falls. The reporters surge forward. Director Yoon, near the back, signals discreetly to a man at the door, who admits 2 officers from the prosecutor's office. They walk to the podium. They speak quietly to Chairman Huang. He does not resist. He looks at the screen and at his son in the front row, and at Min-kyu standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and his face very still. Then he allows himself to be led out of the room. In the hallway, Yuchul bows to Min-kyu. He bows for 15 years of small and large betrayals he did not commit but stood beside. Min-kyu, after a beat, bows back. The press conference, however, is still in progress. Min-kyu walks to the microphone. He says, "My name is Kim Min-kyu. I am the chairman of KM Financial." He pauses. He looks at the room. He says, "For 15 years I have suffered from a rare allergy to other human beings. The simple touch of another person's skin against mine could close my airways and end my life. I have hidden this. I have lived behind gates. I have been afraid." He says, "Some of what you may have heard about me in recent days is true. I did fall in love with someone I believed, for a time, was a humanoid robot. The robot was a real person who was wearing a costume to spare me a burden on a project that I was supporting financially. When I learned the truth, I was angry and I was hurt." He smiles a little. "But I want to tell you today what I believe. I believe I was not loved by a robot. I believe I was loved by a brave young woman who, against very long odds, made me feel safe in my own body for the first time in 15 years. I believe the proper response to such a gift is not anger. It is gratitude." He says, "I am not ashamed of having been loved. I am not ashamed of loving her back." He says, "As for the company that has been built in the shadow of my parents' deaths, that company will be cleaned transparently and publicly of everyone who profited from what was done to my family. We will start tomorrow." He steps back. The room erupts. He does not answer questions. He turns. He walks down the steps. Jia is waiting at the side of the room. He takes her hand. They walk out together. Outside. The team is waiting in the van. They have all of them, including Aji 3, come to be near him on this day. They cheer when he steps out. Hoktal slaps him on the back. Sanip ruffles his hair. P pats his arm. Aji 3, with a small careful gesture, places her hand on his shoulder. He looks at her. He smiles. He says, "Hi, Aji 3. She says, "Hello, Chairman Kim." It is not the way she once said it. It is the way a friend says it, now. That afternoon, the team holds a small celebration at the new lab. Sunhai is there. Butler Sung is there. Jinbei is there. P has, at some point in the past week, dyed a single streak of her hair a bright shade of teal. Baek-gyun, who is generally not observant about such things, walks past her 3 times before he notices. When he finally notices, he stops. He stares. He squints. He says with the air of a man pointing out a stain on a coat, "Did you do something to your hair?" Sunhee lets out a slow, long sigh of long-suffering female solidarity. That same evening, Yuchul, no longer the CEO of anything, sits across from Riel at a small restaurant. He tells her he doesn't know who he will be now. She tells him with a small, mischievous smile that he could try being himself for the first time in his life and see how that goes. He laughs. She tells him she's leaving for a fellowship in Switzerland for a year. She tells him he can come visit if he wants. She tells him to learn to be alone first, properly. He nods. He watches her walk out of the restaurant. He does not chase. He smiles a little. The next stretch of the story is a season. Time passes in small things. Min-kyu and Jia live together, carefully, like two people who have agreed to share a delicate object. They learn how to argue without shouting. They learn how to apologize. They learn, very slowly, how to do the small daily things ordinary couples have done forever. Make coffee in the morning, share the bathroom, sit on the same couch and watch the same screen. His monitor, on most days, stays blue. There are, however, days when it flickers. Days when the cure trembles just a little. He doesn't panic on those days. He sits on the couch with his head against her shoulder and breathes and waits. And his body remembers that she is the safest thing he has, and the flicker passes. Dr. O checks in every week at first, then every month. He notes, in his quiet, doctorly way, that this is unprecedented. The Santa Maria team, freed from Chairman Huang's grip, refines AG3 properly. She is, in her new form, no longer a secret weapon. She is, instead, a research project that the team is allowed to develop openly. AG3 herself takes well to the new attention. She still has her quiet hands. She still helps strangers when she walks past them. The team has, by mutual agreement, given her a small allowance of independent walking time each day. They call it her promenade. Jia, with the help of Min-kyu's foundation, launches a small workshop of her own. It is built on the bones of her father's old garage. She makes things that help people. A wheeled cane that is also a stool. A backpack that doubles as a portable lamp. The umbrella with a button that turns clear, which is now in production. She hires Hoktal and Sanip part-time. They are, despite their love of the lab, surprisingly good with their hands when there is something concrete to fix. Min-kyu, in his own life, becomes someone you would not have recognized from the early episodes. He cooks his own breakfast. He drives himself to the office. He sits in cafeterias. He shakes hands, sometimes with a mild tingling, sometimes with nothing at all. He tells his board, in a meeting that lasts a single hour, that the company will be paying out dividends to the families of every employee who lost work in the years his guardianship was being abused. The board, after a long, stunned silence, agrees. Madame X reveals herself, to him alone, on a quiet evening in his living room. She is, as it turns out, Director Yoon's wife, a woman in her 60s who slipped a card into the boy's pocket 15 years ago at his parents' funeral because she'd been a friend of Min-kyu's mother in school. She's been sending Min-kyu warnings ever since. She apologizes. She tells him she was afraid, and she is sorry. He gets up. He hugs her. They drink tea. In another corner of the story, Yuchul rebuilds slowly. He takes a small position in a mid-sized company, well below his old station. He works late. He takes a class in carpentry on weekends because he has decided he wants to make something with his hands. Chairman Huang is convicted. He goes to prison. He is not, in the end, the most important figure in this story. He is simply the long shadow that a small boy ran out from under, 15 years too late, and a man stepped into the sun in his own time. The proposal comes on a quiet evening in spring. He doesn't kneel. He doesn't make a speech. They're sitting on the floor of his living room, and the heart lamps are on the table between them, both lit because both of them are home. He says very simply that he has a question. She looks at him over her cup. He says, "Do you want to keep doing this with me for as long as we live?" She blinks. She sets down the cup. She tells him slowly that he is, in his way, an extremely strange man. He tells her he is aware. She tells him she will need a little time to think. He waits. She thinks for 30 seconds. She tells him yes. He laughs. She laughs. She climbs into his lap on the floor in a way she has wanted to climb into his lap for many months. And he holds her. And the monitor at his wrist is so blue it is almost ultramarine. He gives her the necklace. He tells her with a small grin that this time it actually belongs to her. The wedding, when it comes, is small. It is held at the seaside near Hongju's place, because Grandma cannot easily travel. Jinbei, in a borrowed suit, walks her down a path of crushed shells. Hongju cries. Donghyun carries the rings and almost but does not drop them into the sea. The team is there. Sunhee officiates, because she has a clean voice, and she's been bossing everyone in this story around since they were teenagers. Butler Sung, in a fine new tie, watches from the front row with an expression that, on his usually impassive face, looks remarkably like fatherly pride. Yu Chul comes. Riel flies in. Director Ye stands beside her and for the first time in years, holds her hand. Min Kyu, at the front of the makeshift aisle, looks at Jia in her dress and laughs, and cries, and laughs again. He says his vow without notes. He says, "I promise to keep recognizing you, no matter what either of us looks like. I will know you when I see you." Jia says, voice wobbling, "I promise to keep being someone who can be recognized. I promise to stop hiding so that you can keep your promise." They kiss, greater than the monitor stays blue. The crowd cheers. The sea goes on with its quiet business. Aji 3 at the back of the small crowd watches. She blinks. Inside her, in the folder that is no longer hidden, the kiss is filed away with all the other kisses she has catalogued in her short, strange life. She turns to Pai beside her. She tells her, calmly, "This is my favourite one." Pai puts an arm around Aji 3's shoulders and says, "Mine too." The married life of Kim Min Kyu and Jo Jia is not a fairy tale, because nobody's married life is. They argue. They forget to buy bread. They have one terrible week in their second year when a new strain of his old reaction flares up out of nowhere and Dr. O has to come to the house at 3 a.m. Jia sits on the floor with a hand on his back, terrified and quiet, while Dr. O works. The flare passes. The monitor calms. They do not mention it again for a long while, but changes the shape of how they live afterward. They install a small sensor in the house. They keep, just in case, a small kit by the bed. They do these things lightly, the way other people install smoke alarms. They go on. They have one child, a daughter. She's born without any of her father's allergy. She has Jia's grin and Minkyu's careful hands and Aji 3's habit of staring quietly at strangers, although where she got that from is anyone's guess. They name her after Minkyu's mother. They take her to the cemetery on the day she turns one and let her toddle, between Jia and Minkyu, holding two of their hands, up the path to her grandparents' grave. Minkyu, kneeling in front of the headstone with his daughter on his knee, tells his father very quietly that he has found a way to say her name out loud in this world, and she answers when he calls her. He promises his father he will keep saying it. His daughter, who does not understand any of this, reaches up and pats his face. He laughs. Yu Chul, who has come along to pay his own respects, stands a little apart and lets them have their moment. When they get up, he comes forward and lays a small bunch of flowers on the stone. He does not say anything. He doesn't need to anymore. In the city, Edgy 3 has begun to teach. The team has, at her own request, programmed her with a new vocation. She visits twice a week a special school for children with mobility differences, where she helps them with exercises and reads them stories. Jia visits her at the school sometimes. Agi 3 always knows it is her, even from across the room. P finally takes that teaching position she'd been offered. She does it part-time. She comes back to the lab on weekends. But Kyun, by the time she has been gone 6 months, has finally noticed she is not as visible in his life as she used to be, and has begun by very small degrees to correct this. He brings her coffee. He asks her about her week. He listens to the answer. It is, the team agrees, a slow miracle. She marries him, eventually. Not because either of them announced anything, just because, after a number of years, she'd simply not gone away. Hoktal and Sanip stay at Santa Maria for the rest of their working lives. They never quite become dignified, which is fine. Sunny gets engaged to a tall, quiet veterinarian who comes into her coffee shop one rainy afternoon and stays. Jinbei becomes the chief operating officer of KM Financial. The year after their daughter turns 3, Agi 3 begins to wear out. She has been running, with only minor repairs, for nearly 5 years. The team has known, for some time, that she would not last forever. Her processors are aging. Her battery is no longer what it once was. She begins to slow, by very small degrees, in the afternoons. Baekgyun, one quiet night, calls Minkyu and Jia over to the lab. He has decided, with Agi 3's input, that she would like to be retired. She does not want to be reset. She wants, simply, to be allowed to power down with her files intact, in her own chair, with the people she loves around her. She has chosen a date. It is, by her request, the anniversary of the day Minkyu first opened her crate. When the day comes, the lab is quiet. Sunny has brought small heart-shaped cakes. Minkyu, Jia and their daughter sit on the floor near the chair. There is no fanfare. Agi 3 sits in her chair. She's wearing the original pink dress. She tells the room, in her calm voice, that she's had a very interesting life. That she has in her files more than 3,000 hugs, more than 200 kisses she has watched, 407 sunsets, and 112,000 individual interactions with strangers. She tells the room, with a small grin she learned from Hoktal, that this is, by any measure, an excellent run. She turns to Minkyu. She tells him she's glad she met him. She tells him she would like him, before she powers down, to do one last thing for her. She would like him to put his hand on her chest. He does. His hand is warm. The monitor at his wrist stays a placid blue. She tells him she has, for years, been waiting to tell him a small secret. She tells him that on the morning of the reset, she did not delete all of his files. She tells him she made a hidden folder. She tells him the folder is called Mon Ami. She tells him that, with his permission, she would like to give him the contents before she goes. He nods, voice broken. She blinks once. Her chest panel hums softly. A small crystal slot opens. A tiny chip slides out. P takes it carefully and lays it in Minkyu's palm. It is, AG3 tells him. Every memory she has of him. Every conversation. Every walk. Every time he laughed. Every time he cried. She has saved them for him. He closes his hand round the chip. He tells her, voice wet, that he will keep her. She turns to Jia. She tells her she has been honoured to wear her face. She turns to Baek-gyun. She tells him, with a simple directness she has always had, that he was her father and he was a strange one, but she would not have chosen any other. He hides his face in his hand. She turns, last, to the small girl on the floor. The little girl walks over to AG3 and lays her cheek against AG3's knee. AG3 puts her hand on the girl's head very lightly and closes her eyes. She powers down with the smallest of clicks. The lab is, for a long moment, completely quiet. Then Pai lays her forehead against AG3's shoulder and cries quietly, the way you cry for a sister. The story does not in the end finish with AG3 powering down. Stories like this don't end on goodbyes. They end on what comes after. What comes after is a quiet morning a few weeks later. San-Ip's birthday, as it happens. The team has sworn, every year, to throw him a real party, and every year they have failed. This year they manage. Jia bakes a citron loaf, because San-Ip has been telling them all for years that his grandmother's citron bread is the only baked good he genuinely loves. Pai has decorated the lab with small handmade lanterns. San-Ip walks into the lab in the morning, expecting another day of work. The team yells surprise. He cries, almost immediately. He hugs everyone. He sits down at the table and eats the whole loaf, by himself, while the team teases him. Min-kyu, watching all of this from the doorway, says nothing. He has, in his life, gone from a man who threw a birthday party for his vacuum cleaner to a man who attends birthday parties for the friend of a friend in a lab with a child holding his hand. The arc, if you could see it from above, is a soft, slow climb. That same afternoon he holds a press conference. It is not a big one. It is small, in a small hall with a small audience. He says, into the microphone, "I want to introduce myself again." The room goes quiet. He says, "My name is Kim Min-kyu. I am the chairman of KM Financial. I suffer, to this day, from a rare allergy to other human beings. The simple touch of certain people's skin against mine can still, on bad days, close my airways. I have lived with this for 20 years. I have, with help, learned to live with it well." He pauses. He looks across the room, where Jia is sitting in the front row with their daughter on her lap. He says, "I'm telling you this not because I'm proud of it, and not because I'm ashamed of it, but because there are other people in the world like me, and I have decided I do not want any of them to grow up the way I grew up. So I am going to start a foundation. I am going to fund research. I am going to fund the doctors who treat conditions like mine. I am going to fund the families who care for them. I am going to do this for as long as I am able." He says, "That is all. Thank you." He steps back. The room applauds. He nods. He walks down to where Jia is sitting, and he picks up his daughter, and he carries her out into the lobby. In the lobby, AG3's old chair has been brought out and placed in a small glass case, like a piece of art. The plaque under it is a small one. It reads, simply, "To AG3, who taught me how to be touched." Min-kyu pauses in front of the case. His daughter, in his arms, asks him who that was. He tells her, very gently, that she was a friend, that she was a teacher, that she was, in her own way, a sister. The little girl thinks about this for a moment. Then she leans her head against his shoulder, and the three of them walk out of the lobby together into the afternoon. So that friend is where we leave them. Not at the meteor shower, not at the wedding, not even at AG3's quiet powering down. We leave them at a small lobby, on a small ordinary afternoon, walking out together into the kind of day that does not show up in any photograph and does not need to. Let me tell you, before you go, where everyone settled. Kim Min-kyu lived a long life. He learned, in his 40s, to play the guitar badly. He learned in his 50s to make sandwiches slightly less badly. He never lost the habit of looking at his palms in the lamplight sometimes when the house was quiet, and turning them over and remembering when the simplest touch could have killed him. He stayed, all his life, very gentle with strangers. He kept his promise about recognition. Jo-jia became, in time, exactly what her father had told her she would become. She made many things. Some of them helped people in small ways, and some of them helped people in larger ways. She kept her father's old workbench. She raised her daughter with very few rules and a great deal of laughter. Hong Baek-gyun received an international award eventually for the work he had once been accused of stealing. He gave the speech in halting English. He thanked, by name, every member of his team. He thanked by name an ex-girlfriend who had once told him he was insufferable and walked out of a sandwich shop. He thanked, last, an android named Agi3, who had taught him things he had not been able to find in any of his books. Hoktal and Sanip never quite became dignified, which was fine. Sunhee ran her coffee shop until she didn't want to anymore, and then she handed it off to a young woman who had been her favourite regular. Jinbei and Hongju had a second child. Donghyun grew up to become a doctor. Yushul never married. He did, however, write Riel a letter once a year for the rest of his life, and she wrote him back. They saw each other in person twice every year. They were, by the end of their lives, the kind of friends that other friends find slightly mysterious. Neither of them minded. Agi3, with the team's eventual permission, was placed in a small museum dedicated to the history of robotics in Korea. School children on field trips were allowed to sit in front of her in the small glassed-off room and listen to a recording of her voice. She greeted them, in the recording, by saying, "Hello, friend. My name is AG3. I am very glad to meet you." The chip with the contents of her Manami folder lived, all of Min-kyu's life, in a small wooden box on his bedside table. He never deleted any of it. He looked at it on certain nights when the house was quiet, and he saw again his own face the day she opened her chest panel for him, and his own face the day she stood across a hilltop and told him, with her eyes alone, that she was sorry and that she loved him. He never minded watching it.